This presentation is on pressure relief valves. This is the final presentation in the Performance Under Pressure online course. So far, we have talked about all of the techniques that we can use to own the pressure, to attain and maintain that zone of optimal pressure of high performance flow. But we all know that even with the right training, the right skills and the right systems, we frequently move into a zone of excessive pressure. We move into that zone of frazzle where our ability to perform in terms of making decisions, judgments and carrying out practical procedures is compromised. So we need a set of techniques to move us from that zone of excessive pressure frazzle back into that zone of high performance flow. We need the tools to regain personal composure, to regain situational control, to recapture the pressure. Pressure relief valves are the fourth section of the Owning the Pressure model. We're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about the relationship between frazzle and flow and moving from one to the other. We're going to talk about 4 techniques that we can use to regain personal composure. And we're going to talk about half a dozen techniques that we can use, especially as the leader, to regain situational control if the pressure has become excessive. So initially, about that relationship between frazzle and flow, which we have discussed in depth in earlier presentations. We want to avoid moving from high performance flow into the zone of frazzle, but that unfortunately frequently occurs, and it occurs for 3 reasons. One is that we develop a cognitive appraisal of threat rather than one of challenge. We perceive the problem to be too big for the limited resources that we have, and that the outcome is going to be negative for us. Developing a cognitive appraisal of threat causes a surge in the release of adrenaline and cortisol through our sympathetic nervous system, and that leads to a fight or flight stress response. Our heart rate increases, our breathing rate increases, our pupils dilate, and we develop muscle tension. And also related to this is cognitive overload. The amount of information and the rate that it is coming to us is excessive, and that compromises our ability to make the right decisions safely and effectively. So if we want to regain that high performance flow zone and move out of that zone of frazzle, we need to have tools and techniques to change our cognitive appraisal from one of threat to one of challenge. We want to overcome that fight or flight stress response through our sympathetic nervous system, and we want to control the amount of information that's coming into us and the decisions that we need to make, particularly through delegation. So 4 techniques to regain personal composure if you are in that zone of excessive pressure frazzle. The first one is the simplest, and that is controlled breathing. Simply slowing our breathing down. About 8 seconds per breath and about 8 breaths per minute. That will act to counteract the overdrive in our sympathetic nervous system. It will slow our heart rate down and it will make us more calm. Simply breathing in for 2 seconds, holding our breath for 2 seconds, breathing out for 2 seconds, and holding our breath out for 2 seconds. 8 seconds per breath, 8 breaths per minute. I particularly like this technique because you can do it relatively covertly. If I'm in charge of a team, say in the resuscitation room in the emergency department, and the pressure is becoming excessive, I can use a controlled breathing technique to regain my personal composure without other members of the team being aware of it. Similarly, I use personal self-talk or an inner dialogue. This is a technique which is very commonly used by high-performance sports people. A voice in your head that you've practiced, either your own voice or maybe the voice of a mentor who you've previously had that thought you could perform well. And having key phrases that you say to yourself, you've got this, you can do this. That can be very positive in helping to regain confidence and regaining your own composure. I think from personal experience, the most effective tool that we can use in a zone of excessive pressure to regain personal composure is a technique called cognitive reframing. And that is to move from that cognitive appraisal of threat to one of challenge. And this involves simply getting out of the high pressure situation for a short period. Get away from the stimuli around you and do something simple and familiar for 30 seconds. This is a technique that I routinely use in pre-hospital situations, looking after patients with major trauma. I'll actually pretend that I've got a phone call to make and I will move away from the scene for 20 or 30 seconds. That helps to remove the effects of excessive pressure, remove those stimuli, and helps reset myself, moving back into the zone of a cognitive appraisal of challenge, moving myself back into that zone of high performance flow. So cognitive reframing, a short period away from the high pressure situation to regain the right cognitive appraisal. And finally, nutrition and hydration are important. We have all experienced periods when our ability to make decisions and carry out practical tasks has been compromised when our blood sugar is low or that we've been dehydrated. And this is particularly important for high pressure professionals who are involved in prolonged periods of excessive pressure. So making sure you've got enough fluid on board, sometimes using caffeine, and making sure that you've got a mixture of carbohydrates and protein. So 4 techniques to regain personal composure. Controlled breathing to overcome that sympathetic overdrive of that stress response. 8 seconds per breath, 8 breaths per minute. Positive self-talk to build your confidence and regain personal composure. The most effective tool, from my perspective, cognitive reframing. Move from a zone of cognitive appraisal of threat to one of challenge. And for prolonged periods of high pressure, ensuring that we've got adequate hydration and nutrition on board. What about regaining situational control? When the pressure is becoming excessive and the team is losing control of what is happening. And these tools are particularly important for leaders in these situations. We've talked previously in 2 or 3 presentations about the value of a rally point. I cannot emphasize enough how valuable this is, especially if we are short of time. Pausing and getting the opinions and the viewpoints from the rest of the team to achieve a shared and an accurate mental model is vitally important to enhance the effectiveness of teamwork. And often that will again move you from a cognitive appraisal of threat to one of challenge. And as part of that rally point, list all of your problems, list all of the actions that need to be taken, and prioritize those actions. This simple tool is vitally important for organising the situation and regaining situational control. And the biggest way that you can cognitively offload to avoid cognitive overload is delegating decisions and practical tasks to other members of the team, ensuring that they have got the appropriate skill set and that they do have the capacity at that moment to take on those roles. Sometimes when the pressure on us is excessive, it's easy to forget that we have got access to cognitive aids in the form of checklists, process guides, etc., which can help with our cognition when the pressure is excessive. So try to remember that you may have cognitive aids that are there to provide you with that information to help accurate and rapid decision making. In certain situations, it can be beneficial to phone, for example, a subject matter expert who actually isn't in the high pressure situation with you, to outsource some of the decision making or to access information or their expertise. And if we do experience very excessive pressure or even the zone of freezing, remember your mantras. In medicine, we have ABC, airway, breathing, circulation. And that is the mantra that every clinician has for regaining control of a critically ill patient who is deteriorating. In aviation, they have ANC. Aviate, navigate, communicate. If the pressure is becoming absolutely excessive, remember your mantras and go back to basics. So 6 techniques, especially for the leader, to regain situational control, to help you move from frazzle back to the zone of flow. Pause for a rally point. Achieve a shared and an accurate mental model amongst the full team. List your problems, list your actions, prioritise those actions. Then delegate them as much as possible to cognitively offload yourself. Remember that you've got cognitive aids and use them. Outsource if you can. And if you're in the zone of real excessive pressure, frazzle and even freezing, remember to get back to basics and use your mantras. So those are 10 pressure relief valve tools and techniques that we can use to overcome cognitive overload, to change our cognitive appraisal from one of threat to one of challenge, and to overcome our stress response. We talked about regaining personal composure through controlled breathing, through personal self-talk, through cognitive reframing, and ensuring that we've got adequate hydration and nutrition on board. We can regain situational control through a rally point, through listing and prioritising, through delegating, outsourcing, using cognitive aids, and sometimes using a mantra. Thank you.